Welcome back, everybody, to the School Leadership Show. This is Mike Dowdy. With me, as always, co-host Jen David Lang. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Fantastic. And I think this is our second podcast in a row where you have found us an unbelievable guest. So I'm going to let you introduce our guest and then we'll get right into it.
Great, I'd be honored to. Well, today we have Khalid Oluewu, who is the principal of Webster Elementary School in Chicago. And I've known him for years because he's been in my mastermind group. And I also had the fortune of hearing him present the research we're going to talk about that he did for the Con Fellows program in the fall of 2023, I believe. His research paper was titled Year of Acceleration for All. Yes, that includes Black males. Very impressive. We want to hear about it and what you did. So, welcome, Khalid, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jen, and nice to meet you as well, Mike.
Great. We're glad you're here. So, just start, from the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role, how long you've been a principal there, and
Sure.
how you became interested in working on acceleration of learning, particularly for Black males?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I started off teaching on the west side of Chicago. I was a middle school math teacher and later an algebra teacher for 8 years at a school called Michael Faraday is where I started. And what I noticed is once scholars entered into middle school, I noticed that they were either um, a year behind or maybe even multiple years behind, and this was just recurring, and I had the opportunity to loop with the scholars, so I would have them for sixth, seventh, and eighth. But when they first came in sixth grade, it was just this vast, like, I don't know, it just felt like what happened the years prior and why are they so behind. um so I just kept looking at that, and I'm wondering, is there a way that we can support them in K to 5? And I just didn't understand why um this was happening at the time. And this was like year one, year two, even some of year three. And what happened is by the time I had them for sixth, seventh, and by the time they got to eighth grade, you would just see this incredible leap, right? And by the time I was in year five or year six, they were getting into the top high schools in Chicago. And even those who were attending my algebra program as middle schoolers, high school algebra as middle schoolers, were also passing the exit exam. And then they would go into these top high schools and they would place into geometry. They wouldn't even have to take algebra their first year. So I was like, what's happening in K to 5, right? And I'm looking at the boys and they're excelling. I'm looking at the girls and they're also excelling. And this is a predominantly Black school that I was teaching at the time. So that really piqued my interest just to see what was going on in the younger grades. And that's where the interest came from initially. So it used to be my dream to be a middle school principal because that was my niche. I felt like I wanted to really take those scholars and did what I did with them during my middle school years as a teacher. But there's not a lot of standalone middle schools in Chicago. Most of them are K to 8 buildings or pre-K to 8 buildings. So I spent a year as an assistant principal and another year as what we call a resident principal, which means I would be studying under a master principal. And after that year as a resident principal, I landed the role here at Webster as a elementary school principal. And I've been here, this is year 9 for me.
That's great. Well, first of all, you're in good company. Mike and I are former math teachers, and I'm particularly a lover of middle school math. So that's
And,
great.
and I tell you what, and I was an elementary school principal, so very close to my heart, Khalid. I'm super excited. So you figure out that there's this, you know, disproportionality, right? That we've
Mhm.
got a group of kids who are not performing. So, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe kind of a little bit more about how you came to that realization and then And then I don't know which came next. Was it the realization and then it was talking to colleagues and getting them on board, or was it the realization, then the solution, then get the people on board? How did it fit together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that stood out to me was that during my years as the middle school teacher, I was getting all these accolades like, yeah, your kids are performing very well. They're outperforming the other schools and the neighbors in the neighborhood. And what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not really doing much. I'm just making sure that they understand it. I had high standards for them. I really didn't know what I was doing that was so different. But what I knew was that um, year after year, and I'll move into um, the changes that I made as a principal. But year after year as a teacher, I kept just noticing that it was the same. Um, so I don't know which came first for me, but I just know it couldn't continue. And I wanted to change the narrative. And I saw that Black children were being successful. I didn't know this other narrative that, um, not most, but a good majority of people kind of bought into. Um, so I always had that in the back of my mind, and I made a decision that whatever school or wherever I landed, that everyone will learn. One of my commitments that I shared with my school community, and they have since adopted, is that we foster an environment where every scholar learns, that it's a will learn mentality as opposed to a can learn philosophy. There's nothing wrong with a can learn philosophy, but I think it's too passive. Um, then you're starting try to quantify, well, they can learn if this is in place, or they can learn if they were living in a different neighborhood, they can learn if their parents were involved. So I wanted to just move those, they're not excuses, right, so to speak, but they're things that we can overcome. So I wanted to kind of move those things that are outside of our realm of control and really dig into what we can impact. So I've shifted the philosophy from a can learn to a will learn, right? And I ensured that the resources would be there. I ensured that moves that were made in conjunction with teachers. I made sure that we built partnerships to support the work. And I made it clear that we are in the will learn. We're going to adopt this philosophy, and I'm going to do everything that I can to remove the barriers so that we can shift that mentality so that um, guaranteed learning for all, Black boys, whoever is in front of us.
So, all right. So I'm assuming, right? We're talking about public school in Chicago, right?
Yes,
Okay, so I'm assuming that when you showed up as the principal of Webster Elementary School, you didn't get to pick your staff, did you?
absolutely not.
Okay, so then how do
Absolutely
you how do you roll up as a new principal and everybody's on board? How did you do
not. Yeah.
that?
Right. Mike, when I rolled up to the school and I said, everybody get on board, they did just that and they got on board.
Great, end of the podcast. Well done.
No, no, absolutely not. I started out by meeting with each teacher the summer before. I met with each teacher one-on-one. And in my meeting with them, I just shared my philosophy. I shared that I was here to really learn from them and work with them. And I started that from day one. I started building partnerships. I started working closely with teachers. And, some people didn't like my leadership style. And some people left, I remember going into classrooms. I was a new leader. So part of our training involved like being in the classrooms, yeah, every week, multiple times a day, at least 3 times a day. So when I would go into the classrooms, they would be like, "Can I help you? Is there something?" And I'm like, "No, I'm here. I'm coming to support and watch you teach." And some people didn't like that, to be frank, right? And then there were some other things in terms of how we treated our scholars. Some adopted a very punitive way of thinking, very old school, antiquated way of discipline, and we weren't seeing positive results from those approaches. So it was a combination of working closely with teachers, trying to change their way of practice. And fortunately, I was able to coach up the ones that um, needed to stay, and then the others, they either left on their own accord, or I helped them transition to maybe a school that was a better fit for them. But I've always just let the scholars guide my my every move. And even, you know, I keep a pulse, and I've talked to Jen about this. I keep a pulse on my staff quarterly, and we are at a point now that, better than 85% of my staff enjoy coming to work. They feel like they're being supported by the admin team. They feel like they have opportunities of growth here. So it took a while. I would say it took at least 3 years to start, shifting um, the way that the way that things were done at Webster, um, initially to now.
That's impressive. It's very impressive. You went in with the mindset of learning from people, but also making clear sort of where you stood, and that you had the fortune of people leaving who were not on board. So that sounds like a very thoughtful approach.
Well, and I
And
like
yeah.
I like how matter of factly you said you helped other people be happy other places. I had a I had a really wise superintendent once say to me that people either need to see the light or feel the heat.
Mm, I like that. I like that.
That sounds like he helped with both.
Hmm.
But yes, I want to hear a little bit more. So first of all, I think it's very fortunate that you noticed this trend with your incoming sixth graders when you were teaching middle school math, and now you actually have this opportunity to deal with the K to 5 as a principal of a K-8
Yeah,
school. I mean, how often does that happen, right? Usually you teach middle school, high school, and you just blame all the people who came before you, as opposed to being able to actually do something about it. So
yeah.
when you came in, when you're talking about your work to accelerate learning,
Mhm.
um, I think you were focused more on literacy, even though you're a math person.
Yes.
Shared some startling statistics in the paper that you wrote. This is from 1999. I'm sorry, yeah, 1999 to 2020. I'm not sure, but this article said that only 12% of Black males are proficient in reading by eighth grade. 12%. And only 6% of 12th grade Black males were reading at the proficient level, and only 1% at the advanced level.
Yeah.
So when you aim to accelerate learning, were you focusing just on literacy, and were you focusing on the full K-8, all of the students in your school?
Yeah. So I want to say a few things. So the first thing was this whole idea about zip code, right? So I can tell you the proficiency level of the scholars based on their zip code. I wanted to completely eradicate that. And then there's this narrative also that talks about Black children don't learn as well as other children. So I wanted to eradicate that too. And I saw that quote, which is why I grabbed it and put it on my presentation, that only 12% of Black males are proficient in reading by eighth grade. And I was like, nah, that wouldn't be our story at Webster. That will not be our story at Webster. But it also reminded me of what happened when I was teaching. Like, yeah, they come all the way and they get to sixth grade, and wow, what happened? So I made it a commitment for us that by the end of second grade that we'll have proficient readers and writers. right? And then from then on, we'll make sure that we continue to work to keep them at grade level or better as they matriculated from grade to grade. But yeah, that was one of the things that really stood out to me coming from a math background. I knew that there was some learning that I needed to do, to lead literacy in my school. So I spent the first couple of years really digging into literacy, working with a partner to build admin literacy around pre-K instruction, kinder, and primary instruction, so to speak. But that year, we were just coming out of the pandemic, and I started the year with my primary at 6% proficiency, right? As a K to 2, 6% proficiency.
That's
Then
wild. And what everybody was just kind of okay with that?
I wouldn't say they were okay with it, but I mean, and this may sound controversial, and I don't mean to be controversial, but I think we use COVID as an excuse in certain ways. I'm not saying that, COVID didn't have a detrimental impact on scholars' learning, but I wouldn't say they were okay with that. But the urgency that I felt when I saw 6% proficiency wasn't the norm, right? You know what I mean? So 6% proficiency, and then we looked at the males, they were at about a 2% proficiency, right?
Mhm.
So when I thought about the steps that we needed to take to do this, I joked, and I don't know if you remember this, Jan, but I joked and said, after looking at these proficiency rates, you have three options. One, maybe just decide to go back home and just reevaluate life. Maybe this is not it, right? That's
Yeah,
one option.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. The second option is to blame, right? It's the parents. Oh, it's the teachers. Oh, it's the school system. Yeah, it's everybody except me, right? And then
yeah,
the third thing is, cry a little bit, right?
yeah.
A little bit, and then let's get back to work. So I chose the third option, obviously, and that's why we are here. But just thinking about 6% proficiency for the
Yeah.
entire primary, and then 2% for Black males.
Yeah, I like to flip it. My husband is a guidance counselor, and he does college counseling, and he always
Mhm.
flips the numbers at these, very difficult to get into schools that have, like, 8% acceptance. He says to kids, you realize they reject 92%. Right? So,
Um,
so to help hit home, when you said 2% of the males were proficient, 98% of the males were not proficient. I don't know, that has
mm,
such a it's a
it
bigger
does.
number to me, even though we're talking about the same thing and we all get the math and can do the
Yeah.
calculations in our head. But yeah, no, that is significant. I'm glad you did not choose to go home. Instead, just cried a little bit and then got rolled up your sleeves. So, how did you know where to start? Where, what kind of things did you want to put in place, and where did you begin?
Yeah, great question. What I noticed is that if scholars are significantly behind, right, even if they made a year's worth of growth, which is typical, which is a good thing. I say if they make a year worth of growth, then they've done well, but they will never, close that gap if they're a year or 2 years behind, right? So what I wanted to do was make sure that we had something that was ambitious yet realistic, right? So what I pushed was for us to accelerate learning by at least a year and a half, like to guarantee learning um, growth for at least a year and a half for all scholars in primary, right? Um, and there were a few strategies that we looked at, and we settled on about four of them, which I'll share now. The first one was we needed to streamline the curriculum in a way where there was a focus on the priority standards. Like, what are the must-haves? are those standards that every scholar must master before leaving kinder, before leaving first, before leaving second, no matter where they fall on that spectrum of learning, right? So the team did some work in pulling out those priority standards. Um, there were some barriers, which I can talk about later too, but the focus was to pull out those priority standards.
Mm.
And then, there are two schools of thought when you think about when you're thinking about working with scholars who are 2 or 3 years um, below grade level, right? You can either remediate, right? So they don't have it, so we have to go back and teach what they missed in kinder. So we spend all a quarter teaching kinder, and then we spend a portion of it trying to teach the grade level material. Like, no, they don't get it. So we go back and remediate. But there's also acceleration, right? And we've learned, even with Katrina, that acceleration is much more impactful than remediation. So what I would tell teachers, because teachers would say, well, if they are 2 years behind grade level, how can I teach them the grade level content? And I said, you can't. There's some things that you have to do, right? And I remember, and I don't mean to brag on what I've done, but I remember in as a middle school teacher in seventh grade, I would say things like, you know what, today we're going to travel back to fifth grade, right? And we're going to do this math because I think you forgot it. And we'll go back and I might spend that lesson hitting those prerequisite skills just to bring them right back the following day at the grade level material, right? That's the just in time supports. And that's where I found my scholars were able to make that connection and really thrive. So priority standards followed by just in time supports, because if they are significantly behind, you have to find a way to fill that gap, but not live in remediation, right? And then small group and high impact tutoring. Now, we were at a point within the district where we were able to use some of those COVID funds,
Mhm.
and the district provided schools with high impact tutoring, like two two scholars to a tutor, 2 to 3 scholars to a tutor. So there was that. And then also we built the partnerships that also supported us with ELA small groups. So we had a lot of small groups, scholars being pulled out for small groups that was specific to their needs. And then, you know, it it's not always easy to do, and that's why sometimes the curriculum itself may be able to help in leveraging student interest as you engage them in learning. And we've seen that our curriculum has been able to support scholars interest, and that also paid off huge for us. And then lastly, we did have some tech platforms that were adaptive. Wherever the scholar fell on their assessment, it would, create a path for them. And we were systematic about them getting it, you know, 20 minutes a day. So that really worked for us too. So
So
that,
Khalid, I got to tell you,
yeah.
it warms the cockles of my heart to hear you begin with standards, because I think too often people look at the curriculum as a static, unmovable thing that you can't
Mm,
operate on, but we
mm.
do have control over it like that. Now, how did you get, what I'm curious about, how did you get staff to not only understand the concept of just-in-time support like that versus remediation, and understanding is one thing. Then how did you get them to do it?
Got it. Great question. I want to talk to your point about standards. So after digging into the standards and then proposing to the teachers, like, we have this curriculum and we may not hit every chapter, every unit within this curriculum. I want you to focus on these priority standards. And I think that kind of eased the stress from the teachers. Some like, you know, I don't have to try to hurry up and get through everything, right? We made sure that there was some alignment, right? They planned together. We know that, you know, in second grade, they're going to see all of this. So when they get to third grade, the third grade teacher is going to have to kind of reinforce some of these things that may be missing, right? So to your point, we ensured that, yeah, we're it's a curriculum, but we control it, right? And we can meet and decide how to best approach it with our scholars. Just in time supports, it did take some time. It took some time for staff to plan for it, right? What we had staff to do was at the beginning of any unit, they would do the pre-assessment, and that gave them at least an overview of what their scholars were able to do, right? Coming into the unit, what they were able to perform well at, and areas where they know they would have to kind of dig into. So that was one part of it. And then the other part of it, how do I tweak it into my lessons? Like, how do I know how much time I need for just-in-time supports? Could it be half a class? Could it be a whole class? And I didn't have the answer. And I said, what we're going to have to do is try it out and see how it works. What we don't want to do is them living in remediation, or them just kind of glossing over the curriculum with them not having a solid understanding of what they're doing. So it took several like grade band sessions, several observation and feedback sessions, and it's still an ongoing thing for us now, especially when we bring in new staff.
You mentioned four-letter word that is the nemesis of all of us in schools, which is time. It must have taken a lot of time, right, for teachers to identify the priority standards. I'm assuming you didn't just slap them on their desks, right? It must have taken time for teachers to adapt and create small group instruction. It must have taken time for teachers to plan what are the just-in-time supports I need to put in. It must have taken the teachers time to figure out how do these new tech platforms work and what am I going to assign and how am I going to, oversee how students are doing. So what did you do about time and then and then learning? Like the teachers need to learn. Were they learning in teacher teams? Were you providing PD? So time and learning. What did you do?
Yeah, definitely. You make a great point. We've been strategic in how we use our funding, right? So at the end of the year, we typically have some funds available. And what I've done with that is to have teachers plan out the entire curriculum, pulling out the priority standards. I've had them plan out the calendar for the entire year. I've paid them to lesson plan. I try to front load some of the things that I know that they're going to need throughout the year and pay them for it. Like this is payment. I always and I tell this to my teachers, like you're being asked to do a lot, and I understand it. And that's why I always reach out to you, Jen. Like I need to prioritize. I can't have my teachers doing all of this. I have to focus in on what's most important. So I take that approach with everything. So I know I don't want them to be spending all that time planning during the school year. So can I pay them in advance to do that work? So there's that. And then on an ongoing basis, I always tell my teachers, like, I'm going to ask you to turn something in by a certain date, right? If you need additional time, please be proactive and let me know that it doesn't look like I'm going to reach it. Can I get can I get an extra prep, or can I have some time to work on it? Fortunately, we have enough support staff that are good at holding classes or following the curriculum, whatever the teacher has going, that I'm able to pull them out of a class. But I'm like, well, let's not abuse it, right? So that's another way that we save time. The one thing that we haven't done this year, and hopeful, we're optimistic about, is to have a planning, like a half day planning period, like give primary half a day where you can plan, right? And then the following week, then maybe we'll go to intermediate. The following week, we'll go to middle school. But time is a real thing, and I want them to have the time to plan because I want to be able to come to the classroom and see teaching and learning, and not teachers saying, "Well, I didn't get a chance to get to that. I didn't have the time." Right? So those are a few ways that we've tried to mitigate the challenges of time.
No, that's wonderful. If you can keep up the funding that really elevates how important the planning is, that you're going to compensate teachers for that. And, I know another system in Japan, they teach far fewer classes and then they have more time to plan and to work in teams. And we just
Mhm.
don't in our American system. So, how do you overcome that?
Yeah.
Um, so what of these four strategies you've tried, where's the success? What has come of all of this, of these four? What have you felt most successful about? Have the proficiency levels changed? What has been the outcome of all this work?
Yeah, I think because I still have my same teachers and in primary when we started this, we're still seeing the same gains in primary, which I'm very pleased about. We have better than 60% of our scholars who are proficient currently. Initially, um,
Wait a minute,
Well,
60
say that
up from
again. Say that.
6%? You went from 6% to 60.
so the year that we that I was part of Con and we did this project, it went from 6% to 50%, right? And then for boys, it went from 2% to 30%. Right. So it was significant. And I didn't want to deviate from like the practices that we had in place because they were proven to be working for us. Right. But since then, right, we're not single digits anymore. We've been kind of teetering around. Yeah, I think we took MOI, and if I remember correctly, for our primary scholars, at least 60 to 65% were proficient. And then now it fluctuates in first and second grade. But we're not seeing single digit, we're not seeing teens. Teachers are really dialed in and looking at the priority standards and really working together in primary. And we're looking to duplicate this school-wide. So we started the work last year and even this year, being more intentional about looking at those priority standards. We do have new staff, so it's taken, that it's going to take some coaching around that. But yeah, that first year it was tremendous, and
And wow.
yeah,
Congratulations. No, I mean, those numbers are just
That's wild.
awe-inspiring. So I mean, that's incredible. And now you want to take it school-wide, meaning third through eighth grade, or meaning math priority standard? Like, what do you mean by
yeah,
school-wide? Yeah.
yeah. I take it school wide where we're looking at reading, we're looking at math, and we are looking at the priority standards. And after looking at the priority standards, we're looking at just-in-time supports. And if we continue, um, what we currently have is from K to fifth grade, we still have the tutors that pull out. They pull out for ELA. In middle school, well, actually from fifth through eighth grade, they pull out for math. So we still have that in place as well. And we have an algebra program that's been successful too. So it just goes back to like my years of teaching and what we were able to accomplish then. And I'm just trying to even duplicate, exceed that. So we still have those same strategies in place.
So, Khalid, let me go back for a second. So, you started this work in earnest with the primary grade teachers, right? So they've gone through this process. They've, prioritized standards. They've got, they've worked on the just-in-time training, the common planning, all that stuff. So, I'm curious. So, as you start to move this to other grade levels, are those primary teachers evangelists for you? Are they helping you make it easier? Are they saying, whoa, dude, this is a lot of work, man. Look out, third grade teachers, here it comes. Or like, how does that all fit together?
No, I believe they have been, my biggest champions actually. As I mentioned earlier, it didn't seem, after we've done the initial work of looking at the priority standards, right? They don't have to do it again, really, right? Because they've done it before. So they are championing it in a way that, once you've done this part and you really have a focus and you go in depth with your focus, it doesn't seem so so huge of a task. So no, they've been champion, and I always call on them at grade band meetings. Like, yeah, can you speak to, what you guys did, what was impactful, what changes you would implement this school year. But they definitely have been champions of the work. So I really appreciate them. I think, yeah.
Jen, look what happens when you treat teachers like professionals.
No, and what a high leverage approach, right? This
So cool.
accelerating learn. I imagine you've been noisy about the results that you've gotten, and I imagine that attracts a strong teaching force. I imagine that gets buy-in from families, and then and teachers. Have you seen a lot of that type of reaction?
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons why we are fully staffed in a hard to staff neighborhood is I appreciate my teachers for word of mouth. I've hired just based on who, they've recommended, and they wouldn't be recommending or bringing their friends or colleagues that they know to the school if they didn't feel like we had something going on that was strong. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. No, and all from this switch from the mindset of a school where students or scholars can learn to will learn. It's that focus from the input to the output and sort of a results focused school. So hats off to you. I think that's
Thank you.
amazing and very helpful for other people. Um, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, do you suggest they come visit you? Would you be open to sharing the paper you put together for the Con Fellows, or any other suggestions for people who want to learn more about accelerating learning for their students?
Yeah, I definitely will. I want to share it. I want people to critique it. I want people to offer, different ideas, because the goal is to continue to improve on the practices. I'm not saying that these practices are bulletproof, but I know that they've worked for us. So I'm gladly open to um, anyone coming to learn more about it. I can share the paper as well. I'm really invested in the work, and I'm grateful for the staff and their involvement and their openness to listen to some of my ideas and make it their own.
Well,
Amazing.
Khalid, this was an unbelievable conversation. You've been so generous with your time and just what a refreshingly simple yet effective approach that when managed appropriately with not only vision but consistency, and it's clear that you adore your staff too. So, it's just wow, just super inspirational. So thanks, man. This is a really cool conversation.
Good. I appreciate it. I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here, and we'll post your info in the show notes so people can reach out. And yeah, thank you. Really, but more than the conversation, thanks for the amazing work that you're doing. It is wonderful to have a light of
Very
inspiration.
cool.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. It wasn't too bad.
That's good. Glad to hear it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.